during the last part of the Cretaceous. Greater Yellowstone was home to the most recognizable dinosaurs, and lots of them. Alongside T-Rex, Triceratops, with its 3 horns and flamboyant neck frill, grazed ancient Montana for millions of years. It thrived here until the mass extinction that wiped out all of the supersized dinosaurs. Triceratops took its last breath on land that today is famous for its spectacular geology that hides its prehistoric past from all but the experts.
It captures the ecosystem of the dinosaurs just before the extinction event.
We probably have more Triceratops that have been pulled out of the ground than anywhere else in the world. The greatest numbers are from Montana, the Dakotas, and Wyoming.
Now, a discovery in Montana reveals surprising new details about the beast that's been described as a placid, prehistoric tank.
Not too far from this particular specimen, there are a number of other specimens that represent other animals, just within, a few hundred meters.
One of these animals was a massive T-Rex. And the predator's skull showed deep holes that were only partly healed. Was Triceratops equipped to defend itself and possibly even attack its enemies? Scientists are digging deep into the daily life of this 30-foot-long plant lover that grazed ancient Yellowstone, hoping to find answers to pieces of the fossil puzzle that haven't quite added up until now. The Yellowstone region didn't look like this 66 million years ago. The Absaroka, Gallatin, and Teton mountain ranges hadn't yet appeared. So Triceratops wandered through lush forests and plains where vegetation was plentiful.
It looked more like modern-day Louisiana, with crocodiles around, and there'd be lots of river channels and palm-like trees, and it would be warmer.
Dr. John Scannella is one of the world's experts on Triceratops. And he leads expeditions from the Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman, Montana. While T-Rex looms large in many people's vision of North American dinosaurs, John has always been fascinated by the carnivore's favorite prey.
If you're looking at a Triceratops, probably the first thing you'll notice is the horns. It has giant horns above its eyes and then another horn above its nose. At the front of its face, it has a parrot-like beak, but it also has teeth in its jaws. And then at the back of its skull, it has this long, bony frill. And then behind that, it's a quadrupedal animal, so it walks on all fours, and then there's a tail at the end of it. So it really looks like a combination of animals today, but really unlike anything around today.
Most reconstructions of Triceratops show it fleeing its mortal enemy, Tyrannosaurus rex, or dying on the prehistoric landscape in the aftermath of the deadly asteroid. Scientists have discovered numerous Triceratops remains in the Hell Creek Formation, in the far north of the greater Yellowstone area, at least compared to the fossils of other dinosaurs.
The Triceratops is the most commonly found dinosaur out here. One of the reasons is that a lot of the bones are extremely thick and dense. They've lasted many millions of years, and they've sustained all sorts of movement through rivers and channels and rocks falling on them and so on. Another reason is they were probably common animals on the landscape. They were herbivores, so there were many of them, kind of like cows on the landscape here today.
Yellowstone isn't just famous for its geysers and wildlife. The region is a fossil treasure trove. Many features of present-day Yellowstone stem from the Pliocene, about 10 million years ago. At that time, the entire region, including the Rocky Mountain chain, was being slowly uplifted by giant earth movements to heights several thousand feet above its previous level. 60 million years earlier, in the Cretaceous, the flatter, more gentle landscape was the perfect place to be a dinosaur.
a lot of different people that have worked out here and built up our fossil collections, our geological record. Without those people, we couldn't bring all of this together to be able to tell a story about Triceratops or any other dinosaur.
Dr. Greg Wilson Mantilla focuses on the evolution and ecology of animals during major events in Earth's history. Despite the large number of individual Triceratops that have been uncovered, the scientists don't believe the creature traveled in herds.
There have been fewer than we'd hoped for examples of multiple individuals of Triceratops found together. So we would predict that they would perhaps die together. Maybe they were herding animals, we think. So we'd expect to find that in the fossil record, and so far we haven't. And it's unclear why. It may be that we have it wrong. Maybe they weren't herding animals, they were more solitary.
The most they've found together is 3.
In other horned dinosaurs, there have been huge bone beds of some horned dinosaurs, suggesting dozens, if not hundreds, of these horned dinosaurs, perhaps in a herd moving together. So far, that hasn't been found for Triceratops.
It's relatively easy for paleontologists to identify a Triceratops in the field, even in a place like Greater Yellowstone, where so many dinosaurs once roamed. The horned head was enormous and distinctive. It made up 1/3 of the entire length of the dinosaur's body, with some skulls being over 7 feet long.
Triceratops was one of the largest horned dinosaurs with one of the largest skulls of any land animal to ever live.
With so many specimens to compare, John's been able to see that the shape of the Triceratops skull changed over the few million years that it roamed the late Cretaceous, around 65 million years ago. He's been working to solve the mystery of why this happened for years. The earliest Triceratops, those that lived longest ago, show small horns above their noses. Then the horns become larger and larger in fossils found closer to the mass extinction, or KPG boundary, which marked the end of all the dinosaurs.
Currently, there are 2 recognized species of Triceratops. Current evidence suggests that these 2 species of Triceratops did not live at the same time, but instead were separated in time. And as we explore the Hell Creek Formation, we find that Triceratops horridus, with the little nose horn, is typically found lower in the Hell Creek Formation, whereas Triceratops porsus, with the big nose horn, is found higher up. And so it looks like horridus might have evolved directly into porsus over time.
This is a process called anagenesis, or transformational evolution. It's where one species, over time, transforms into a new species, without branching out into 2 distinct species, sharing a common ancestor. Triceratops shows a remarkable physical metamorphosis during the 2 to 3 million years it was alive.
There's been a lot of controversy surrounding the number of species of Triceratops and related genera. And one of the great things about building up a large collection of Triceratops skulls and other elements of Triceratops has been that we are able to really tease apart that problem and test that hypothesis. And in the process of comparing these skulls, what we've started to notice is that maybe there were 2 different species of Triceratops.
John Scanella's team has also found fossils that clearly show the changes from when they were youngsters to becoming senior citizens of the Greater Yellowstone Cretaceous.
So far, the smallest known specimen of Triceratops has a skull about yay big, which is still fairly large. So what it looked like before that point in growth is almost completely unknown.
We have a series of Triceratops skulls from very early babies that are no bigger than the size of a pit bull dog, all the way up to the ones that are 1 to 2.5 times the size of a rhino.
So we can study how it changed from a baby to an adult, and also how it changed over the course of the end of the Cretaceous period.
The scientists don't know why the shape of the horns changed over Triceratops' time on Earth. But they have theories about the transformation during an individual's lifetime.
And we can see that as it grows up from a baby to an adult, the horns change shape from going backwards to forwards. The spikes around the frill start out very spiky and then kind of flatten. The frill expands. So we can see these things happening as it's going from young to older.
Triceratops' distinctive horns may have been critical for young dinosaurs' survival.
It might have had something to do with visual signaling and communication as the Triceratops was growing. You're a Triceratops and I'm a Triceratops, and I bump into you and you look at me, but my horns are going backwards. It means that I'm merely a young Triceratops, and maybe you would be less upset about it because you could recognize that I'm a young Triceratops.
We can't know for certain, but based on fossil discoveries of other plant-eating dinosaurs, Triceratops mothers may even have cared for their young.
It's kind of an interesting area of research at the moment. When I go out into the field, I'm always, I try to keep an eye out for teeny tiny little horns and frills.
One thing that John is certain of, from the earliest Triceratops to the latest models, evidence shows that they weren't the helpless grass munchers as they're usually depicted.
Triceratops lived with a number of pretty iconic dinosaurs, T-Rex being number one among those iconic dinosaurs.
Despite the traditional depictions of a dead or dying Triceratops with a victorious T-Rex looming over its body, the plant eater wasn't easy prey. Paleontologists from the Museum of the Rockies have also uncovered some specimens of Triceratops with evidence of healed bite marks, suggesting that Triceratops successfully fended off their would-be predator, T-Rex, some of the time.
With those horns on its head, it certainly could defend itself, and probably did defend itself multiple times from the only thing that probably could have really eaten it, which was T-Rex. So with those horns, that probably saved its life a few times, I think.
They also battled amongst one another, and some fossils may show injuries from other Triceratops, both healed and raw at the time of death.
So there have been some studies looking at marks on the sides of the skulls of Triceratops, which have been suggested to have been made by the horns of other Triceratops. So they seem to match up with if two Triceratops were to lock horns together. It could be that these marks on the sides of the skulls formed by the interaction of the horn and the face. They might have engaged in some kind of Triceratops to Triceratops combat, perhaps over territory or mates.
And Triceratops sported a sharp beak, perfect for shearing off thick plant stems. But this iconic dinosaur's eating machinery was far more interesting than scientists previously thought. Up to 800 teeth were constantly replenished and arranged in groups called batteries.
They have these teeth that are shaped like leaves in lateral view with a very strong vertical ridge down the middle. And those teeth in life were sitting in a jaw, and they were usually about 3 or 4 deep. And they form this long tooth row that they can masticate food with. And when that one at the top is done, another one pops up in its place, constantly replacing that tooth battery with new ones.
Even a conveyor belt of teeth wouldn't have been much help during a battle with a T-Rex, but it's unlikely that Triceratops ever succumbed easily to the fearsome predator.
Triceratops has several defensive adaptations, one of which is that big frill on the back of their skull, that huge shield. One thing it would have been used for is to protect its neck and the back of its body, and probably to fend off the Tyrannosaurus rex. But also those horns would have been able to level a blow against any predator that was coming after it.
As the researchers continue to investigate Triceratops, they've learned that its skin closely resembled that of an alligator.
Some impressions of Triceratops skin have been found, and they have relatively large scales over them. So far, no one has found any direct evidence of feathers on a Triceratops.
Finding any soft tissue, even scaly skin, in fossils that are 66 million years old is extremely rare. But skin or no skin, every specimen has its own story to tell. Greater Yellowstone's prehistoric landscape captured Triceratops of all ages at the time of their death. And the most recent discovery by the Burke Museum's team is just a stone's throw away from remains of its mortal enemy. Greg Wilson Mentia is currently excavating a new Triceratops fossil. And it may have a complete skull, but only time will tell.
What was super clear right from Jumpstart was that there was a big brow horn and part of a frill sticking out, as well as this rib that was a little distant from it, and more skull going back into this pretty steep cliffside.
This Triceratops lies very close to a T-Rex they recovered a few years ago. And this predator's skull had deep holes that were partly healed. Both dinosaurs lie in the rock layers of the very end of the Cretaceous. And they may even have died together. The scientists can speculate and dream, but millions of years of geologic upheaval in Greater Yellowstone may have caused the two dinosaurs to be closer together, or spread farther apart after they died.
Trying to understand how an individual died in the fossil record is extremely difficult detective work, and you're really looking at both the geology as well as the anatomy of the bones. So the geology of the surrounding rock and the anatomy of the bones that it accrued through its life. So not the anatomy of a pristine animal, but of an animal that perhaps has some wounds preserved, and which we could then trace something like predation or it being killed by a Tyrannosaurus rex, potentially.
The scientists will work to determine if the wounds inflicted on the T-Rex were made by another carnivore, and if the unsung Triceratops engaged in one of the very last prehistoric battles before dinosaurs vanished forever.
And so far what we're seeing is suggesting that this animal died perhaps on the floodplain, alongside of a channel, alongside of a river, not falling into the channel and drowning or being carried off and deposited that way, but maybe laid out on a floodplain, and scavengers may have moved its bones around. They're not in the life position of the animal that it had when it was living, and we might have some that are missing. That might be through scavenging, or it may be through trampling from other Triceratops, or maybe just weather and being exposed. We don't know for sure, but as we expose this quarry, we'll start to test those ideas.
Each fossil and every bone the scientists uncover within Greater Yellowstone adds to this common dinosaur's complex story. The common vegetarian that's been painted as the equivalent of a rhino with a very low IQ was anything but. The more Triceratops the scientists uncover, the closer they'll be to knowing how the beast really lived and how it interacted with its foes.
As a scientist, I'm interested in understanding that entire terrestrial biota, and dinosaurs are part of that. They were dominant in these terrestrial ecosystems during the late Cretaceous. And so understanding their daily lives, how they fed, how they lived together or didn't live together, how they occupied the terrain, whether they were active during the night or during the day. Those are all key aspects of the biology and our avenue into understanding the ecology of these animals and how they interfaced with all of the other animals and the plants that were living at that time. And if we can piece that all together, we can start to understand what happens at this major biotic crisis that took place 66 million years ago.
66 million years ago, 75% of all life on Earth was almost instantly wiped out. The scientists want to understand the daily lives of creatures that lived before the mass extinction and compare those that survived to those that did not.
The story of the dinosaurs and what they were doing and how they were living and how they were reacting to what was happening with the environment can give us insights into what's happening in the environment today, what might happen in the future.
There's no better place to undertake this massive endeavor than ancient Yellowstone.
Understanding dinosaurs, I mean, they are sort of the poster child for this mass extinction event. So understanding dinosaur lives gives us some sense of what shaped mammal evolution. So understanding what dinosaurs' lives were like really sheds light on what our lives and our biology and our evolution was like. Without the dinosaurs, we wouldn't be here.
The paleontologists believe that the past is the key to the present. As the scientists continue to collect a growing wealth of details, they'll be able to recreate the last days of the dinosaurs in a completely fresh and authentic way. And hopefully, through lowly Triceratops, shed light on our fragile future.